Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this learning experience brought to you by Sentinel One. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. Before we dive into our presentation today, I do have just a couple of notes I'd like to review with everyone. First off, we are recording our session today. So if you miss any of our conversation, if you'd like to watch again at a later time, or if you'd like to share this with your team, you will be receiving the recording via email shortly after we conclude this live session today. Now, if you'd like to get involved, there are a couple of ways to do so. The first option is to use the chat tab on the right side of your screen. So when you find that chat tab, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you're joining from today. Seeing Germany, Peru, LA, Utah, people from all over. Now, if you have specific questions, we do have some time set aside at the end for a Q&A period, and we want you to submit those questions to the Q&A tab. So you'll find that tab on the right side of the chat section, and if you submit your questions to that Q&A tab, we'll be sure to keep track of it and do our best to fit it into our session today. And if you jump to the handout section, you'll see there are a couple of resources. Feel free to grab those before you close out. And we will be selecting two of our most engaged attendees today to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So be sure to send in your chats, your questions, and of course, fill out our post-webinar survey that can be found in the handouts, and we'll be posting the link toward the end of our program as well. So today we'll be discussing logging's not dead, long live logging. I'm joined today by Tom Martin, Director of Solutions Engineering Data at Sentinel One. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. Do you want to go ahead and dive right in with us?
Sure. Thanks, Cody, for the intro. And hello to everyone out there. My name is Tom Martin. As Cody said, I'm the Director of Data Solutions Engineering here at Sentinel One. And today we're going to talk about data lake as a service. Make no mistake, every company that I talk to, everyone is using cloud providers, everyone's using Kubernetes, everybody's looking at logs around security devices, security appliances. And it's not shrinking at all. Logging platforms are not going away. If anything, they're growing larger and larger. So with that, let me dive right in. When we talk about data and volumes of data, these are three of my favorite numbers. 3x is actually if you take the time period from 2019 to 2023, we have generated 3 times the data volume in just 4 short years. So it's almost 100% per year growth, which is crazy. 1.7, if you're trying to guess what that means, think about an average internet user that generates about 1.7 megabytes of data per second, not per day, not per minute, but per second. If you do the math, it's about 150 gigabytes of data per day per user. Amazing data growth, exponential data growth, and that's not getting smaller, right? It's always getting larger. And 90%, that is the percentage of all enterprise data that is machine generated. So think about data coming from firewalls, coming from Windows event logs, coming from VPC flow logs, coming from application logs, coming from Lambda functions that are emitting logs. All these things are generating all this data all the time. And the real question is, how do you handle that type of scale for that much data and keep it performant, cost effective, and really make it easy to manage and work with? So nothing new here. Data, it doesn't matter where it comes from. Some data is single purpose. DevOps, if I'm looking at GitHub or Jenkins or Jira logs, those may have a single purpose. But there's also data that comes from engineering for IT use cases, for SecOps, DevOps, DevSecOps, take your pick. Whether you're pulling data from any of the various services of AWS or GCP, or maybe Nginx logs, Kubernetes logs, any of these data sources can come in. And if you can correlate that data together, all of a sudden you can do some amazing things like incident response, or you can do hunting, threat hunting from a security standpoint. In the world of IT or security, both compliance and audit are huge use cases. I need to go back and see when somebody accessed a specific machine? Or did somebody just download 400 files in 5 minutes? And what are they doing? And did they download it to a flash drive, or did they download it into a public server? Those are some of the things where you need to maximize the shared value of the data, because I can use it for multiple different use cases, and it all needs to come in and be processed, right? There's just no substitute for having logs. In today's world, we have observability platforms, we have APM solutions, we have security solutions, we have SIEM and SOAR and all these different point solutions. But in reality, I just want a data lake to store all my data so that I can search it when I need it and have it always readily available. If you're like most people I talk to, this curve that you see over here on the right-hand side of data growth is going up and to the right, and it's exploding fast. Most people I talk to don't have budgets that do that. The budget lines are either a straight line or they're going down. So IT budgets or data budgets, they're just not growing like the amount of data is. So what do? You either have to sample data, drop data, or in most cases, what we find is customers say, hang on, I can't put that in my logging solution. Let's take 10%. And I hope that when a problem happens, that 10% of data that you've got happens to have the right message, the right event, so that you can get back and figure it out. Other people will say, you know what, I'm going to collect all of it, but I'm going to put something in front so I can summarize it down. And then I'm going to maybe I'm going to create summary indexes, or I'm going to create roll-ups, or I'm just going to limit 3 days of data instead of 7, or I'm not going to store this for a year, I'm going to store it for a month. But all these workarounds, they're complex, they're expensive, and 90% of the time it's about discarding data. And what do you need when you're troubleshooting or when you're threat hunting in a security world? You need the data. You have to be able to get to it, but you don't want the increased costs, you don't want the blind spots, and you definitely don't want your mean time to resolution to grow. So these are some of the problems. Scalability issues. A lot of the platforms that we look at today, they just weren't built for this scale of data. Think about your own use case, where whatever logging platform you're using today, if I said you're ingesting a terabyte a day and you need to go to 10 terabytes in a week, could you do that? What would it take? Who would you have to involve, right? In a modern approach or a modern development, a modern logging platform, you want that to scale on its own. So cost concerns, I talk to Splunk, Elastic, OpenSearch customers all the time. Do you like the platform? Yes. Does it do what you want? Yes. Do you like the price tag? No. And that's an issue, because when you have to provision hardware, you've got to take the total cost of ownership. How much hardware do I have? How many people do I need to support it? All of that. And yet it's still not flexible enough to integrate with all these systems that you're using. So you end up with one system. You may have a handful of Elastic servers. Maybe you're putting stuff in relational databases. Maybe you're putting data into a data lake. Maybe you're putting it into Google Drive or S3 buckets. But you end up with data that's locked away and can't be used together. And that's just a recipe for disaster. So again, it's siloed tooling, it's inefficient operations. I have to have an expert on each one of these tools, and then somehow I'm going to pull some of this stuff together when I need it. I don't think anybody's, either IT ops teams or SOC teams are growing exponentially like the data is. So you end up with an understaffed situation, and then cost overruns. I know myself personally, when you're using a logging platform, it's never fun at the end of a month or the end of a quarter to get a bill saying, hey, you went over, here's what you owe us. Nobody likes surprises. So if you're using platforms like a Splunk or an Elastic as your primary logging platform, just realize those are 20-ish years old platforms. They were built for on-prem with heavy indexes. They're not designed for high volume or high cardinality data. The data models, although they say it's schema at read, Yeah, sometimes you can do it, but is it really? You see things like Elastic's common schema. You see things like Splunk's common information model. You see things, all kinds of different schemas all over the place. Yes, it's schema at read. You can do it, but for the most part, you're dictating what fields you have when the data comes in. If you look about 10 years later, you had some platforms like Sumo Logic, Logs.io, and Splunk introduced Splunk Cloud. Those are still based on on-prem architectures that are lifted and shifted to be in the cloud. I refer to that as a hosted, cloud hosted model, where if I want to go from 1 terabyte to 10 terabytes, I still have to open a ticket. I still have to request that they provision more hardware. Yes, it's running in the cloud, but I have to tell somebody before I do it. If you're looking for a modern cloud native multi-tenant architecture, that's what Singularity Data Lake, which is what I'm going to talk about today, is all about. It's designed from the ground up as a cloud native service. It's fully managed, minimal operational impact. I'll get into all the details in a little bit, but just know it's lightning fast, it scales with you, and it's cost effective. Those are really the three things. If you're going to take three things away from today, that's what you want to take away. We talk about these different models. If you're using a search or a logging search analytics platform that's on-prem, you have a lot of work to do, right? You've got to secure the hardware. You've got to provision the hardware. You've got the OS, the service monitoring. Is it up? Is it down? How many of my searches are actually being throttled back, right? How many do I have? How many times do I wait in a normal day? Are my users actually hitting search, walking to the water cooler, getting a cup of coffee, and coming back? Um, but you've got a lot of things to plan for. When you go to a cloud hosted model, it's a little bit better because somebody else is taking care of all that hardware, all the storage, the operating system. But there's still a vast amount of things that you have to plan for. You've got to do the capacity planning, the workload management. You've got all the data ingest and normalization. That's all on you. When you go to a cloud native platform, everything from this third box down is taken care of for you, right? It just scales. There's no workload management. There's no capacity planning. If you want to move from 1 terabyte to 50 terabytes overnight, it's doable because the platform scales as it needs to. There is still data normalization to do. Here at SentinelOne, we use OCSF, the Open Cybersecurity Framework schema, and that's what we will map everything to. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But there is also the ability for you to use any kind of schema or parsing that you want. So key value pairs, JSON, you want dotted JSON, whatever you want, bring it in and you can parse it, or we'll parse it using default parsers out of the box. And then data ingest, we have some easy buttons and we have some agents. So if you're familiar with like a Splunk heavy forwarder, right, we have a similar type of collector, the Sentinel collector, that can do the same thing. So it can bring in syslog data. It can monitor drives or folders or files, directories on a server and bring in specific data, and it can parse it. It can dedupe. It can do a lot of those things. We'll get into a lot more of that in a little bit, but just know when you look at a cloud native multi-tenant SaaS architecture, this is what it buys you. It frees up your staff to do more because it's all taken care of for you by the platform. So fast time to value, whenever you look at a data lake as a service, it is faster time to value because, again, there's not much infrastructure to stand up, if any. If you choose to use a monitor that can pull data in using an API key, there's nothing to stand up at all. It has to scale when you need it. You shouldn't have to do infrastructure planning. You shouldn't have to do capacity planning. You don't have to monitor the infrastructure. And you only pay for what you need. Pay for what you use, right? Pay as you go. Pay per query if you want on long-term retention, something we do that's kind of unique. We don't have the notion of hot buckets and warm buckets and cold buckets and frozen buckets. There's no need to re-ingest data because it's all hot all the time. And we are, like I said, multi-tenant by design. So you get the benefit of an entire cluster. And I'll talk about what our architecture looks like in just a minute. But the results are you get improved service availability, in some cases up to 80% faster queries, and you get higher team productivity because these query speeds now I can execute 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 queries in a time it would have taken me to do one. And historical search, if it's all hot all the time, 90% more than alternatives for compliance and audit data because the data is there. It all lives in the same place. We're not putting this in different buckets and creating separate indexes and segmenting out the data and sharding the data across it. It's just not happening, right? Which generally speaking results in a lower total cost of ownership. What we see is usually, I'll say 30 to 50% lower. Singularity Data Lake, I've mentioned it a few times. It is one data platform for whatever data. It's logs, it's XDR data, it's SIM data, it's SOC data, it's IT ops, it's Jenkins, it's Jira, it's Okta, it's Windows event logs, it's firewall logs, all of that in one place. Unbounded log ingestion. I had a customer during a POC a few months ago now, actually, that they told us they were going to send us 2 terabytes a day. They actually ended up sending us 25 terabytes a day. And when we checked in after a couple of days of ingest and said, hey, did you mean to send 25? It was, oops, we meant to send you our development platform. We sent you production. So, but the key is the platform just scaled. It didn't matter how much data, it just scaled. There was no capacity planning. There was no workflow around, I need to provision new hardware. It just worked. So a modern logging architecture in the middle is where you're going to have your data lake, and the use cases of that. You can do search, monitoring, dashboarding, alerting, integration with other platforms, whether it's a webhook or Slack or Teams or those kinds of things. You've got to be able to get all the use cases out of it. And the ingest is really where people spend a large majority of their time. With SentinelOne, we have our marketplace, which we'll take a look at in a little bit, but these are predefined integration points where it's quite literally point and click, and we'll look at a few of those. We also work, We also work with log shippers. So if you're using Kafka or FluentD or Logstash or Cribble, or if you have Splunk Heck, we can ingest all of those data from those sources. So if you are a Cribble shop and you want to use Cribble to reduce the amount of data you're sending in and then put it into a more cost-effective platform, you can double dip, right? If you're using Logstash or FluentD or Kafka, you can point those shippers directly to us and we'll ingest the data as quickly as it comes. And then we also have, like I mentioned, we'll work with different agents. So we have the SentinelOne agent. So if you are an existing SentinelOne shop and you have SentinelOne's EDR agents deployed in your environment and you want to capture, say, Windows event logs, you can do that directly from the SentinelOne agent. We also have the SentinelOne collector, which if you're a Splunk shop, you can think about this like a heavy forwarder. I'm going to drop this on a box. I'm going to pick up syslog data, or I'm going to forward syslog data to that box and send that in as well. We also have plugins in that agent for Kubernetes, plugins for Windows, like Apache log servers. There's a number of different ones. Or if you just want to monitor a file or directory, you can do that with that same agent. So at a high level, it's ingest, whichever way you want, get the data in, and then use the data. And we don't really care how you use it. If we have an integration with Grafana, if you're a Grafana shop and you want to use logs from us, but you want to use metrics from Prometheus, and you want to marry those together in a Grafana dashboard, by all means. We do have our own dashboarding, and I'll show you that in a little bit too. But this is really where the rubber meets the road. So if you're going to talk about a modern logging architecture, these are some of the components that you need, right? We don't have a concept of indexes. We put all of the data into a columnar object store. So this is a proprietary format that we have. This runs on top of S3. And there's a massive parallel query engine where every single node of compute in that cluster gets applied to every single query that gets run. As the data comes in from whatever systems you're sending it via whatever method, whether it's those log shippers I talked about or sending it in directly through an API or one of the agents or Kafka, you can do data redaction. You can actually limit or sample if you want and drop specific data. We have customers that send in debug logs and then drop it right here at the pre-processing layer. When they need it, they simply go in and change one of the rules in a parser, and that debug data then starts streaming in. So you have the ability to dynamically change whether or not I'm going to keep the debug logs. When you need it, it's really nice to not have to go redeploy code to turn debug logging on or change something in your environment, because the minute you make a change, you've lost the ability to troubleshoot, right? So a modern logging architecture enables me to do things like that. So we parse the data on the way in. There's a streaming engine. There's a summary service. So you can do all kinds of really interesting things here. And then we've got a query language called Power Query. It's very similar to the query languages that you would use in Splunk or in Elastic. For instance, a pipe eval we'll look at in a little bit, but a pipe eval in Splunk, we would have a pipe let. Very similar. If you're used to using stats count in Splunk, you would use group count in Power Query in our language. And then on the backside, we have Livetail, we have dashboards, we have real-time alerts, troubleshooting and root cause. And with our security data, we also have remediation actions. So I'll show you a little bit of that when we go into the marketplace, which I will talk about now. So the Singularity Marketplace is really the easy button for ingesting data. So if you have a SentinelOne agent, the easiest way to pull in like Windows event logs is just to use that SentinelOne agent and have it send it in. It happens through a policy override. You push it out to your agent starts sending the data in that you want, and Bob's your uncle. The Singularity Marketplace is probably the second easiest way to get data in. If I want to pull data in from, let's say, Okta, I can go click the Okta tile, go to the connection, give it an API key, tell it what domains I want to look at, and then give it an API key to send the data into Singularity Data Lake. And boom, I'm getting all of my audit logs from Okta into the data lake. Same is true for Mimecast, similar kind of ingestion. If you're a Microsoft 365 shop or Office 365 shop, we can pull all those logs in as well. So if you want to know who's accessing what, who's downloading files, who's doing things like that, that's all there for you to be able to ingest and take advantage of. So we'll look at the marketplace specifically in the demo. But with Singularity Data Lake, it really is powering both security and IT analytics and SIM use cases and XDR use cases. So the ingestion is simplified. The analysis is being able to correlate the data from different sources is huge, right? Alerting and automation. I talked a little bit about remediation actions. If I want to tell Okta to make someone re-authenticate, I can do that. I can log them out of all their sessions, or send a message to Okta to tell them to log out of all their sessions and make them re-authenticate. If I want to shut down somebody's email, I can do that through the integration with Mimecast, right? You can do threat hunting, and we'll take a look at a dashboard for threat hunting and investigation. And long-term retrieval, again, you can query years worth of data that is stored in a cost-effective manner. So it's all about getting speed, scale, and cost under control with massively growing volumes. So what we typically see is reduced mean time to detection, mean time to repair. 96% of all of our queries return in 1 second. I mentioned that summary service. If you drop a panel onto a dashboard, that is going to go into the summary service. There's nothing you have to do. It just happens, so that in the future, when other people execute that search on the dashboard or through an API call, now all of a sudden you're getting cached results. So it is literally 5 to 10 times faster, depending on what your use case is. Reducing TCO, I kind of beat that home a while ago, which is you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the capacity planning, you don't have to worry about setting things up front. You don't get billed for your max usage, you get billed for average usage. So there's a lot of efficiency going on there. And then the ability to scale elastically and not having infrastructure, not having capacity planning, it just improves your overall operational efficiency. So with that, I'm going to talk about something else. What about AI? Every company in the world, it seems today, is talking about AI. And we're no different. So SentinelOne is investing heavily. We have since day one in machine learning and AI-based security. Now we're adding that power of AI to all of your data. So artificial intelligence is AI. It's a big topic today. And inside of that AI umbrella is machine learning. And machine learning really has two classes of types. You have supervised ML, which is where you're going to fit a model. You're going to fit the model, and then you're going to check the results, and you're going to do various different models and pull them all together. Once you've got it, the model fit in and honed in, you're good to go. But there's also unsupervised ML, which means I'm just going to look at the data in real time and identify things like anomalies. I want to here's a slider. I want to set my my sensitivity level so that I want to automatically identify outliers as I'm going through the data. So that's more of an unsupervised, just look at the data and tell me what's going on, right? And then we get to the subject of generative AI. And this is where you take highly scaled ML models working over massive amounts of data, and they can actually learn from a representation of things. And when prompted, they can generate new artifacts based on what they've already learned. So take the generative AI and layer on top of that large language models, because again, Gen AI is about highly scaled ML models, and we're going to pump the large language models into that so that now I can ask an English question or Japanese or German or whatever your language is, and have that model figure out what I want, figure out what I meant, and then execute commands and generate human-like text outputs. For SentinelOne, we call that Purple AI. And time permitting, at the end of the demo, I will walk through what Purple AI is and how it works. But what it provides you is simplifies operational workflows. You can better understand things. It makes it faster. You don't have to learn the query language. You just ask a question and it will generate the query language for you. You'll see that too. And it lives right inside of the console. So you can have notebooks so that you can save your analysis. And you just say, am I being targeted by a wizard spider? And it'll tell you the indicators of compromise or the threats where you're seeing it. And then it'll suggest next steps, next statements. Hey, based on this data, wouldn't you like to do this? We'll look at this in more detail in the demo. So with that, let's jump in. So this is the SentinelOne console. I am logged into my account here. And this is the gateway to getting into Singularity Data Lake is really clicking this visibility link here. And when I do that, it's going to bring me into the Singularity Data Lake. So this is where I'm looking at either my EDR data, that's all my endpoint data, XDR data, which is endpoint data plus the enhancements from our marketplace, or all data. So it doesn't matter where it comes from. Now you notice this has a specific format, and we're pulling some extra information that we know about the data. That's because it's XDR. It's OCSF formatted. We know that going in. When I go to all data, this is where I say, just show me everything. And this is a query that you would not ever want to do in some platforms. I just grabbed 13 million events over the last 4 hours, and I have all kinds of different data. So if I look at my different data source, just the vendors, I've got Active Directory data, Ativo, Cloudflare, Microsoft, Okta, Palo Alto, Roaring Penguin, okay, SentinelOne, Wiz, and Zscaler, all kinds of different vendors, and then the different types of data that I've got. So I'm going to set this back to my XDR data. Whoops. And the gremlins are out. So I'm going to set this back to my XDR data. Sorry about that. Before I go in, though, the Singularity Marketplace, this is a catalog of all the integrations that we have. And I'm going to limit this. I'll scroll down here real quick. So you've got AWS, you've got Azure Active Directory and Event Hub, Cisco Duo, FortiGate, FortiManager, Netscope, Mimecast. You can see there's a number of integrations, and I've got this set to just ingestion. But if I take that off and look at everything, you can see the list grows. You can see the size of the slider over here. The list grows and continues to grow every day. We're adding more to this marketplace. If I do look at the ingestion, these are the ones that can actually pull data in. So if you have App Fabric, you can pull that data in. If you want to search, let me look for just 365. There's Microsoft Office 365. And if I want to look at the details of how I would set one of these up, there we go. So I will grab one of these. Actually, let's close that. I'll just add a new scope. You're going to give me a tenant ID, an application ID, and a client secret. This is the Microsoft piece. And then I'm going to go, what do I want to pull? So I want security alerts, Azure Active Directory, audits, audit logs. Here's where I want to send it. You have to have a token. So you put your token in there and just use a default parser. And you're good to go. That's it. Click install and you're done. Again, it's the easy button. What about maybe I want to look at Okta? How does that work? If I want to come into here and I want to set up a new, we call them new scopes. When this loads, the demo gods are not on my side today. Oh, and of course I got logged out. Let me go back here. I apologize, folks. And I'll go back to the marketplace, which is a good spot for me to mention. Yeah, so if I go here, you can see the details. All right, I'm going to punt on that. If you are logged in, you can see the marketplace and the catalog and everything that's available here. If you're not a Sentinel-1 customer, just go to the sentinel1.com website, go to the platform section here, and you can get to the Singularity Marketplace here. So that's where I am on this page. And you can scroll down and you can see all the different integration points that we have. So again, anything that you ingest data using what I call the easy button or the marketplace is all OCSF schema out of the box. So we parse that for you, nothing you have to do. So you're future-proofing where your data is and where it lives. So that's a little bit about getting data in. If I go back to, come back to here, actually, give me just a second. This is what happens when you have a 30-minute timeout and you click too long in the slides. All right, so I'm going to go back in here to DeepViz, which is our search window, and now I can go into my account, my Sentinel-1 account here, and I'm just going to look at Okta data. So this is our Okta overview. So now this data is coming in. And again, it's pre-parsed in OCSF format, and I can have line charts and bar charts and graphs and everything that you would expect in a normal dashboarding platform. But let's go take a look at what these queries look like. So this is just request by device ID. So now I'm looking at the individual device IDs, and I can see it as a pie chart. If you don't like a pie, you can use a donut. If you don't like that, you can put it in a table. And any place I do any of this, I can share these searches. This is a link that includes the time span that I'm looking at. It includes the query that I'm looking at and what type of data I'm looking at. So I can copy that to the clipboard as CSV, text, JSON, or Markdown. I can do a saved search. So we have this concept of a search library. So these are my searches most recently. I have some that I've said, hey, I want to save. So this impossible traveler is a query that I've got. I can see shared. So this is amongst people in my account have shared these, or Sentinel-1. So we have searches that we recommend. So Sunburst DNS request, Sunburst IP, NTDS copy, and we will continue to add to these. And if you just click on one of these, you can see what the actual search is. and then the query type and how long it's generally for. So that's the search library. And this is all nice, all well, but I want to look at the actual raw data. So now what I'm looking at, and I'm going to get rid of this device ID stuff. And again, I'm still looking at this timeline, but if I just wanted to go back and say, show me the last 10 minutes, and I want to expand this into a graph, a few things to note. All of these fields, again, this is all done with OCSF schema as the data comes in. And you can see that I've got 18 different event types here. So if I wanted to break this down by that event type, it's as simple as clicking a button here. And I'm not a big fan of this line chart, so let's do a bar chart. And what I've got now is for over time, I've got a bar chart broken down by this. Now, if I wanted to add this or share this, again, I can copy the link, I can post it to Slack, or I can save it to my shared searches, or I can save it as a graph, or I can save it to a dashboard. So if I save this to a dashboard, then that's going to immediately become available to anyone else. So it's, again, a modern logging platform should let you do all these types of things. So I didn't have to do anything at all other than tell it what I wanted to split this data by. So what if I wanted to compare? Maybe I want to see this versus the previous hour. Now I can see it. Now this is an example where I probably do want a line chart because I want to be able to draw the differences. I want to zoom in here and see exactly what was different. Is that an anomaly, right? So this is now versus an hour ago. So you can do a lot of really interesting things. I'm going to go back to the raw logs though. And again, we're looking at Okta data here. Anytime I click on any individual event, and this is true of any data, I'm going to see this little pop out over here that shows me all of the data that I want. I can use this to expand all. And when I do that, now anything that's dot notation expands out. If I want to see only I'll just do only the logon events, I have the ability to include, exclude, or just copy the type equal logon. I'm just going to include it here. And when I do that, now I'm going to be searching for login events from Okta for this period of time. And there you go. I've got 486 matches. I'm going to go back and just say, show me over the last hour. And you can see these queries are very fast. These are ad hoc queries over the last hour. But you can take these queries, add them to the dashboards, and then when we come back into the dashboards, you can do all these pretty graphics that you like here. If I go back here and I say, show me the last 24 hours, that's pretty quick. What about 72 hours? What about, let me just go back 7 days. So, and you can type 7D, you can type 7 days. It doesn't matter, right? You don't have to know the actual formatting of it. It just works. If I look at potential threats, would anyone be curious why someone would log in from 3 or more IPs over 7 days? Okay, but what about the last 10 minutes? So Celestial Thunderstorm logged in from, this is demo data clearly, has 30 instances where they logged in from 3 or more IPs. That might be something I want to look into. Or Phoenix Emberstorm has been locked out and he's tried, right? He's got multiple failed logins. He's got 24 failed logins. Maybe I want to reach out to him and say, hey, do you want me to reset your password? Would that be helpful? So these are all things that you can build in the dashboards and in the searching. And it's just lightning fast. Again, speed, cost, scale. That's what we're talking about. If I look at other dashboards here, I'll go to this threat investigation. From a security standpoint, I want to take the data that's coming from both my endpoints and from my XDR data, and I want to see things like, what is the event type of category here? I want to see the file timeline. So renames, pre-execution, file deletions may be very important, right? I want to see all these indicators. I want to look at processes. So what processes are running? What are the top spawned processes? And what are the groups that are targeted by command lines? So these are the individual command lines that are coming back. This is all based on EDR data. So we looked at Okta data, we looked at EDR data. You can pull data from AWS or anywhere else you want, but you can look at you can slice and dice the data any way you like. So I'm going to move over, and Cody, I don't know if we have any questions, but if we do, just let me know, because I'm going to pop to a little bit different take now. And we're going to talk about a little bit about Purple AI. So this is what we talked about, where you're going to add AI on top of what we're looking at. So I'm just going to take this one and say, what log sources are most common in my environment, right? It's an English language question, and it's going to analyze the data. Here's the query. So if I wanted to just execute that query, I can do that. So I didn't have to learn anything. I just ask it a question, and registry value modified. That's my largest event type. And then if I scroll down, you'll notice that the most common log source, it gives you a summary of the results. So your log source is related to file and registry activities, such as file rename. And then it gives you some suggestions. Now, Purple AI has been trained on our query language. It's been trained on the actual data, and it's been trained on what should we do next. So which specific processes most commonly associated with registry value modified log source? Sure, let me ask that question. And it'll go off and think for a minute, and it formulates the query. So if I look at my query, here's the whole query. I didn't have to learn anything about how to do a group count by, right? I didn't have to know what these fields were. Because it's OCSF, as the data comes in, we're trained on the OCSF model. So we know what that schema looks like and how to ask questions. And I can always take this to go right back to the raw data if I want. So let's take a little bit different example. Now this, you'll notice, was stored in my notebook. And if I want to, I can come up here and rename this, this notebook as February 6th Techstrong webinar. And I'll keep the date there and save that. So now my notebook here is saved for eternity, right? Or until I delete it. But if I want to do something a little bit different, right? I want to say, let's go reset. I don't want to use any of these existing ones. I want to do something like event viewer tampering. I want to find somebody that's messing with things. So find event viewer tampering by user. Now, again, I didn't use any schema. I didn't have to know anything about the data, but because I asked this question, Purple AI knew that the event type I was looking for was a behavioral indicator. And sorry about that. It's event viewer tampering. It's going to group by the process user. And would you look at that? I can look at this as a pie chart or a bar chart. The same thing you saw me do in the dashboard. We just try to make it easy for you. But now I've got this Jean-Luc guy is modifying event viewer events, and he's done it 120 times. So further investigation is recommended to assess the extent of tampering, right? It gives me some suggested things, which you saw me just do that a minute ago, but I'm going to use a little different query because this Jean-Luc guy has me kind of concerned. And I'm going to say, which computers have the most logins for this specific user? Again, that's not query language. That's English language. I could have a level 1 analyst could use this and execute searches to figure out what's going on in their environment. It doesn't take years of practice or education. And again, this is giving me an overview of what the events are, or it should have. I am not having luck with the demo gods. Okay, let me go back to, this is one that I did just yesterday. And you can see, this is my notebook from yesterday, from when I did this at 2:02 Eastern Standard Time. And it looks like a lot of these are related to things in the enterprise called the board. So then I just said, hey, find me the detailed indicators for this user on the board. And it came back and told me there were 57 results. And I can go, so I can continue to go back through these. And with any of these, I can click on an individual ID. And this is a SOC summary that I could quite literally copy and paste into a security ticket that says, hey, there were multiple indicators related to information stealing activities, such as 6 indicators related to info stealer were identified. So here's the MITRE ATT&CK technique that was used, this one and this one, OS credential dumping and credentials from web browsers. It's a potential threat. So I could grab this whole thing, copy it, and put it into my notes for security or audit or investigation. And there's nothing I had to do. All I had to do was ask the question. It found these results, and then it does the analysis on the fly. So this is Purple AI. This is currently in beta. It'll be GA very shortly. But again, you get all of the data down here, the raw data, and then all of the analysis. So you don't need a lot of investment in learning query languages. It makes your staff way more effective, way more efficient, and it gets you to an end very, very quickly. So again, kind of getting back to the main topic of a modern logging platform. If you're using platforms, first and foremost, logging is not going away. Logging is not dead. We will continue to need logs. We need a platform for those logs that's scalable, that's fast, performant. If I were doing what I just did in Purple AI and it was not performant, and I had to wait a minute or 5 minutes between each query, or go figure out what next query to run, that can take hours, days, weeks. We're shortening this down to minutes and seconds. And eventually we will get to automated remediation as well. So that's, Cody, I'm going to lean on you a minute and ask if we have any questions out there.
Yes, so it looks like we do have a couple of questions in. I also apologize. It looks like it may be cutting out. Am I back with you?
You are.
Perfect. Awesome. So we did receive one question from Detlef. Where are the used data from the examination stored, and can I use any S3 system?
You can use any S3 system. So I'm assuming the reference is AWS's S3, and yes, it can come from any bucket. We can store in our S3 buckets, or you can store in your own. We have a bring your own S3 bucket. It is possible. And I'm sorry, the first part of that question was, where is the data stored?
Yes.
Yeah, the data is stored it's our proprietary format, but it is sitting on top of an S3 bucket. So the raw data sits in S3 buckets, but it is in a proprietary format, and it is encrypted at rest and in transit, both.
Perfect. It looks like we got another question in, so thank you, Paul. Purple AI looks versatile, but is its AI model updated frequently to keep pace with new hacks, breaches, and vulnerabilities? Can users customize natural language prompts to be as granular as they want to be in their queries?
So not yet. That is the plan. That's where we're headed. But yeah, I'm assuming the reference is hallucinations, and we do update the models. We update it very, very frequently, as a matter of fact. And the whole intent is so that we do reduce the amount of hallucinations. You can't eliminate them all, but the intent is to get as close to zero as we can. And then customizing the natural language prompts, that will come. It's not there yet.
Wonderful. Well, I do want to just let our audience know that we have a couple more minutes. If you do have any last second questions that you'd like to send in the meantime, Tom, I did want to thank you for joining us today, and I wanted to give you the floor one more time if there were any parting thoughts or maybe absolute final takeaways you think our audience should leave here with?
The one thing I would leave you with is logs are the ultimate endpoint. There are many, many tools that will help you to troubleshoot and root through things, but the very best way to figure out where a problem is and get to the bottom of it is to look at the logs. So modern logging platform is going to be critical to that. It's got to be scalable. It's got to be cost, speed, and scale, basically. And with that, I will say thank you very much.
All right. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be here with us and with our audience. So thank you so much.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. So before I release our audience, just a couple final reminders. We have been recording our session today, and you will be emailed a link to access that recording as soon as that becomes available. You can also find the recording living on the Cloud Native Now website. That is cloudnativenow.com/webinars. I will be reaching out to 2 of our most engaged attendees to send out some $50 Amazon gift cards. So thank you for your chats. Thank you for your questions. And of course, it is not too late to become eligible by filling out that webinar survey, both pinned to the chat as well as in the handout section. I'd like to thank SentinelOne for sponsoring our program today. And to everyone here, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you spending it here with us, and we hope to see you at a future Techstrong Learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Thanks again, Tom.